Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm your boy Retro Bliss, and you are on the Retro Bliss Rewind podcast. And I am excited to have this episode tonight because we are talking about a console that is near and dear to my heart, the Atari 2600. That was my first system. I got my system in 1977. Yes, I'm an old fart. That's right. But we talked about the consoles last week and the hardware, but this week we're going to talk about the games, and the games is really where it's at. And so before I bring on our panel, I want to say a little something. We were supposed to have Mr. Poestyle tonight, and Mr. Poestyle was unable to be here. And I just want to let him know that our thoughts and prayers are with him. I don't know. I think he had a little family thing going on. I don't know if it's really serious or not, but regardless, just to let him know that we miss him. And for those of you who were expecting him to be on tonight, he was unable to be here. So without further delay, let's get Mike for Mike's Gaming Gala and Brian for BD Retro Mods. What's going on, fellas?
Hey. Oh, not much. I'm a little disappointed that I won't have some good Mr. Poestyle banter with some of these games, but
yeah, because he's for those of you who are regular viewers of the Retro Bliss Gaming show, the YouTube channel, you guys know my love for the Atari 2600, and for those of you who are watching the simulcast over at Mike's Gaming Gala, you guys know Mike's love for the 2600. So this is a very exciting episode that we're going to have tonight, and I'm very stoked to have it. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a little history tonight. And so without further delay, we're going to have Brian start off with a little history about the games and how the games got started, how they were developed, and all that fun stuff. Take it away, Brian.
Yeah, so like I said, we're going to kind of go through the whole kind of history of how the Atari carts kind of grew and the different forms that we ended up having of them, because there were a lot during the tenure of the Atari during the commercial times of it. And the information that I'm kind of going over, I pretty much sourced from either Atari Age or Wikipedia itself. But again, you had your initial Atari games that were from 1977 through 1981. All those games.
Eightfold Nine.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all those games initially came from Atari themselves. There were no such thing as third-party developers yet. So with that, when they like we talked last week, when they launched the 2600, 9 games were offered, at release. And those ones had the plain label with colored text, as you see there. And then they also had numbers on the end label of the cart that pretty much tell what it was in internal development. So obviously Combat being number 1 was the first game in internal development for Atari. And those games, as you saw with what Mike showed, were actually sold in gatefold boxes, which was really the only time we got that style, which you would eventually see again in television games. So like I said, that text label was the major standard that Atari used. I mean, again, number of games like, that Mike showed there, like with Combat. I mean, just another one I just picked up here, Superman, that's the style that they just did on those initial games in that time period of the run of them. Now, the note, though, that many of these games would get re-released later on, and they would eventually have artwork to them. But that's why when you see ones that are text only and others that then eventually had the artwork versions are the later. Because some people think, well, that's because they were cutting corners and they got cheaper on it. No, this was actually the first style before they started to go to graphics on the carts themselves. So, like we also talked about last week, that, there were Sears versions, because again, Sears would only carry the Atari if they got to put their branding on it. And with that, you would also see games with their logo and under the Telegames branding as well on those, where they actually got 3 exclusive games, which was Steeplechase, Stellar Track, and Submarine Commander. But like I said, those are all under the Sears branding. There would also be some games that actually took a different title when they were under the Sears branding. But again, other than that, they work perfectly fine on an Atari. Many of those same games just rebranded under that, because again, we're kind of in the wild, wild west at this point. Like that, it's not like we're used to now.
It's important. It is important to note that Telegames releases from that period are not third-party releases. Correct. They are Atari games sold under the Sears brand.
Correct. But then with that, like I said, the picture labels would eventually get introduced there later in 1981, replacing all those old text labels that you would see then, like I said, throughout the span of the 2600. But then from 1982 to 1985, then Atari started to go with what's kind of known as the silver label branding, which, as you see there, that Mike's holding up. So, this labeling was used between 1982 and 1985. They were produced alongside the picture label games that continued to be sold. Most of those silver labels would not appear under other labels. There's a few exceptions to that, but for the most part, the silver label line was their own stuff. So,
and there is a difference between early and late. They had the stripe, and the later ones didn't.
But yeah, so again, as you saw with the cart, those labels, silver gray background, picture in the middle, the name is in white letters across a red stripe. The end label is red text on a black background, and ultimately not counting, because again, don't hold me on this number because it was me manually counting stuff, but not counting revisions. Because something to keep in mind is during that silver label run, and even other, like when we talk about red label, these games got reprinted multiple times, and like they didn't ever really say this was quote unquote a reprint. The only way you would maybe know is the copyright would change on it or some little minor thing, but you could have like 3 versions of Centipede there in the silver label line, and other different ones. I think Crystal Castles had a number of various like revisions with it, but overall, not counting those revisions, there were about 40 silver label carts in the North American market, and kind of a rule of thumb to me, and I don't know how you guys feel about it. I mean, there's a couple in it, but for the most part, I think that silver label is like a very good standard to go on. Like
it's a solid lineup.
Yeah, if you want to go back and collect for Atari, like it's like, where do I start? The silver label line, I will say in most cases, because again, there's one game we all know about that, is very, very popular under the silver label that was a little bit of a stinker, but for the most part, they are all really good games, and I think you could have a lot of fun with most of them. I don't know of too many bad ones in the silver label list. So
I think I generally agree with that. Yep.
But then we also had the children line of games, the children's label. This was kind of really within 1983. I think some of these got reprinted again later when the Atari was trying to come out again for a second time. But with those, all of them, for the most part, had a grid pattern over a solid background. And then in the upper left corner, there was labeling that said if it was from like Muppets or Disney or Peanuts or Children's Computer Workshop, which was the Sesame Street line of stuff.
So the one exception to the grid pattern was the Sesame Street line of games.
Yep.
It doesn't want to focus. That's okay. You can tell they're crap.
Yep. But yeah, so you had that was predominantly in 1983, and then
This isn't crap though. Get this game.
No, that game is
awesome.
It's a little expensive for loose.
Emulate it. Just play Red Baron. Do yourself a favor. Play Red Baron.
Yeah, it's a really good one for sure. That's probably the one game out of all of them that I like the most. So, but then last but not least, then when it came to the Atari games, you had the Red Label Atari games, which these came out from.
And I brought this one. Sorry, I brought this one out specifically to point out that games that were previously released by other publishers did get acquired and released by Atari officially, because this is a Coleco game.
Yep. Yeah. So what happened in that is kind of to Mike's point that when the Atari got re-released, with AKA the Atari Junior, Atari Core at that point, which I think it was Atari Core at that point still. Yeah, because I think Jack Trammell had that. If I'm wrong, someone correct me. But ultimately, with the release of the Junior, they also got a hold of the licensing from Coleco and from Parker Brothers for the games that they made on the 2600. And again, these red labels would come between 1986 and 1990. So let's say that again, 1986 to 1990. I mean, 1990. I mean, like we talked about last week, we're in Sega Genesis era at that point. And, and here we are still
13 years later, they're still going.
Right. And
it started with the black and white pictures.
Yep. Yes. So yeah, with the red labels, for the first year, the pictures were monochrome, but then they would later switch the colored pictures on that red background. That red would also, which again, don't ask me why, and you can kind of see in Mike's picture, some of the games were a dark red and others were a red brownish color. And again, not sure why they kind of went on two different shades there, but hey, that's a Atari.
I don't think it was on purpose. I think it was just different print runs.
But and again, the text is white, and then the end label is red with a white text as well. And then as we kind of talked about here already, some of those red labels are reissues of some of the most popular games, such as Gravatar, Space Invaders.
It is another set that I would highly recommend collecting for. It is a great set of Atari games.
Yes, and just kind of like, and again, because Channel of the R's said it best. I mean, that's some of the best games that they made. And again, at some point, I hope to get a whole red label collection myself. I mean, I'm close, but there's definitely some that I'm missing, because that is definitely some of the best games that were for the console for sure, and you can't go wrong. And I would go and say, I don't think there's a single red label game that's bad. I think every red label game that came out in North America is a good game worth purchasing. So, and then again,
no, wait.
Well, again,
it's okay. But
well, yeah. I mean, obviously, I would rather play it on other consoles, but
yes.
But I mean,
yes, I hear you. Like, there are no games that I can think of that are bad.
Right.
Let's say it that way.
Yeah. Right. So, and again, I might be off on this number a little bit, because I think someone said 27. But when I went through, not counting revision releases, because even with Red Label, they re-released Red Labels a couple times. I got 28 Red Label games released in North America. So like I said, don't hold me to that number. It could have been 27. I might have counted wrong somewhere. But ultimately, there was about that many Red Label games. And like I said, a lot of them are definitely fun to play still today. And so kind of with that, that's the core Atari cartridges, going through the history of the carts themselves. And now, obviously, though, another big thing which kept to the popularity of the Atari, but it also kind of led to the downfall, and that would be your third-party games, which I'm going to turn that over the mic.
Before we do that, can I?
Yeah, this is a great time for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Unfortunately, it's not now, but last week during Amazon Prime Week, they had this on sale. It's called the Atari Archive Volume 1.
I'm so upset. It was still $100 up here in Canada.
Yeah. It was $19 and some change. It talks about
discount.
It talks about the first 20 games that were released for the Atari 2600, and it gives a historic overview, and it gives comparisons, pictures, differences between the telegame versions and the Atari versions. Very nice. There's a few other little nuances in there, but even so, it's still at Amazon for $29 here in the US. I was glad I got it. After I got it, I was thrilled to have that in my library. So I thought I would share that with you guys if you're ever interested.
Sounds like if you're really wanting it, Mike, it might be cheaper to have one of us buy it for you
and mail it to you. Yeah. Well, you hear he's coming to Korg's. He's coming to Korg's next year. He's coming to Korg's next year. So anyway,
we'll see. I'm looking at all the cartridges that are on my desk right now, and I'm wondering where I'd even put a book. So, yeah. So, third party. Howard Scott Warshaw actually very famously says in his when he talks to people that Atari, the way they viewed it was Atari didn't make a video game console. They made a VCR, and they thought that they were the only ones that could make VHS tapes. And so in 1979, the world's first third-party game publisher was created from some disgruntled, I don't even know if I'd go so far as to say disgruntled, but there were Atari programmers that weren't feeling like they were getting the percentage of the profits that they deserved, the recognition that they deserved, and just the notoriety that they deserve, because they're the ones creating these games. And they broke off and formed Activision, which was the first third-party publisher of video games. So that right there is called, what Cannabis Kid is talking about is called Pepsi Invaders. I have a reproduction card of it, so I don't have it to show here.
That is worth the original.
It's worth a lot of money.
Lots of money.
Lots of money. I have a reproduction one. Channel of the R's says that Activision really messed up the industry. Maybe more so in modern times. I remember the late 1970s, early 1980s really was the Wild West of video games. And as we go through some of these third-party publishers and just how interesting and different all the carts are, that's one of the things I absolutely love about collecting Atari, is that every publisher looks different. There are obviously similarities because they also have to fit in the same console. But unlike any other system, just the differences in labels and cartridge shapes is really cool to me. So let's start with Activision.
As you're starting to grab some stuff, just to kind of answer a couple things there from Channel of the R's that, again, I'm with Mike on that. I mean, Activision, like, I feel like they utilized the power of the Atari 2600 extremely well at the time. I mean, because again, they were limited to what kilobyte cartridge sizes they could, economically put out there. And I think at that time period, I mean, I think they did some of the best, games in that range where you had those. And I think, like I said, what happened was, and again, Mike will eventually get into it, it's just everyone wanted a piece of that pie, and they weren't necessarily as good at making games, and because it was a new thing. And but then also just I know, and again, I'm not saying every Activision game was good. I mean, there were some low ones, but again, like when I just think about growing up, I mean, like a number of the ones I played at my aunt's house, they were Activision games, and they were fun. I mean,
no, I grew up in the era when it happened. I remember only getting Atari games, and I remember when the Activision games started coming out. And you know, as much as I like Dragster, it's not a great game. I mean, you know, it's an okay game, and it can be fun, but it's not a stellar 2600 game by any stretch of the imagination. But as a general rule, for me, I felt if I had a better shot at getting a good game if I bought an Activision game than if I bought something else. Because back in the day when I bought a game, we didn't have an internet, we didn't have magazines really to read, we had commercials. And we bought our games from an electronics department. We didn't have toy departments and tons of advertising and all this other stuff. And I personally didn't have a lot of friends with 2600s that I could compare and see what they had. So I had to really, you know, make a decision. And based on my personal experience, I had a better shot at getting a better game with Activision game. But
yeah, they're not all winners, but they had a general reputation for quality.
That's my point. You're right. They weren't all there. But as far as they had a better batting average.
Right. And that's that's every publisher, right? I mean, every publisher has a couple duds in their stuff. I mean, even today. Yeah. I mean,
could you do me a favor and bring up Channel of Yars's most recent comment?
Yes,
where he starts with
I just got done talking. I was.
Yeah, no worries. I wholeheartedly disagree. I think that if third-party publishers never existed, Atari would have gotten very complacent and the games overall would have sucked. It's the same reason that, you know, Nintendo fans that wanted Sega to die, Nintendo was good because Sega was there as competition and vice versa. Right. It's the same with, like, if Xbox and Nintendo and PlayStation weren't around and it was just one of them, they would get a lot more complacent. That's my personal view on it, and I think it's been proven over and over in history. Like we'd still be riding the 2600 now if there was never any competition. That said, Activision, the first third-party publisher, their boxes, really, when you look at them from the side, there are subtle differences, but from the color box era of Atari 2600, these fit right in. They all had this kind of simplistic artwork on the front, at least in this era.
They had a little rainbow symbol in the artwork somewhere.
Yeah. And these are probably the style of Activision carts that most people are most familiar with, where it has a screenshot right in the middle. It's a bright color. Well, in the case of Space Shuttle, maybe not so bright, but then it has a title, big Activision, and on the end. More so than a lot of other publishers. I mean, Atari carts in general have this issue, but Activision in particular gets all these blue spots on the label. It is notorious especially in the lighter colored ones. But this is the artwork that they started with. They moved on to having kind of more custom artwork for every game. And it wasn't quite as uniform as it used to be. And then, of course, Activision, having been around with the 2600 for almost its entire life, right at the end, they started getting really cheap with their labels. Let's print either a monochrome or a black and white. And there's another, I couldn't find one. I know I have one or two, but it's got it's a white label with a blue border and blue text in it. Mm-hmm. So lots of different looks, but this is the the iconic one.
Yeah, because I think Rampage was like that, right? For the 2600, the blue. What you're talking about?
Rampage. The Rampage I have looks like this label.
Oh, okay.
It says Rampage, like it has a Rampage logo there, but it's a black label with the white. But a lot of their late releases did also come in that very simplistic blue border, white background. And like Jeremiah Thomas mentions, yes, Activision is known for quality. That doesn't mean every Activision game is good.
Yeah.
I have never met anybody that likes Bridge. I don't like Dragster. It's fun for about, and it's not even like, it's fun for about 2 minutes. You race twice and you're good. Yeah. Any game that's only fun
unless
for 2
you're
minutes,
obsessive compulsive.
Unless you're obsessive compulsive.
And I know Mr. Baseman asked, is Space Shuttle good? My opinion is no, but I don't know what your guys' opinions are, but I do not like
Space Shuttle. Is one of those games that if you only have the cartridge, you will never be able to play it. There was an overlay that would go on your switches because the switches all do things in your Space Shuttle. There's a lot of things that you need to know. I like it, but the learning curve is high. You have to know how to play. And so if you were a kid and all you had was a cartridge, you didn't have anything else, you're not doing anything with Space Shuttle. Okay, so moving on.
Wallace is saying something that, kind of was the theme for a while, not only from Activision, but, and you're going to bring up some other third-party companies, other third-party, they were bringing some quality games into the market that were putting Atari to shame for a while, and they became some of the better companies, really.
I just dropped a couple cards here.
That's okay. So I agree with what Wallace was saying, and I know you're going to talk about Magic, but he's mentioning Magic and
Apollo.
And Apollo.
That's actually the next two that I was going to talk about. Yep. Another company that had a pretty darn good reputation overall, that again doesn't mean that all the games are great, was Magic. And that is another company formed later, again, from people, programmers that left Atari. And they, all of their games look like this. I have never seen in a Magic cart that looks anything any different. Some of them have an image on here, but it's always this slanted front with a silver label.
They're slightly longer.
They are slightly longer than a standard Atari 2600 cartridge, yes. Mm-hmm. Very slightly. And Apollo. So Apollo, when they first started, had these blue labels. And on the back is stamped Apollo, which is really nice. But they also have kind of more random image ones. These are the ones I think they're best known for. But they also have these, and there's a Shark version. These, to me, look a little more generic, but...
I will say, since you put it up already, I'm going to set mine aside now for the gems. Okay. But Wabbit is, I really enjoy that one a lot.
Good game.
It's a very good game. It is a good game. And it's not an expensive game. It's definitely worth the price of admission. So
yeah, I'm not sure any of the Apollo games are really that expensive, which is good because it is a quality library for sure. In no real particular order, but we'll do this one because it looks similar to the Magic ones. But Data Age, again, silver carts. Not quite the same sloped front, but they do have a sloped front. And did I bring? Yes, I did.
Warp Lock. I wanted to love that game so much.
Yeah. Well, here, have some Journey Escape.
Yeah, that
instead.
that was one of my second gems. So yes, it's a weird game, but it's a fun game. And again, it's not that expensive. I mean,
if you want a really bad game from Data Age, play Bugs.
Oh yeah.
And that's a battle game too.
And then afterwards play Warp Lock. And yeah, both bad games. And disappointing because again, for someone who loves playing games with a paddle,
yes,
I wanted those to be good. And it's just like I got them and I'm just like, yeah, these are trash.
and then sticking with silver slanted front, Parker Brothers. Here's two Parker Brothers games. And the thing that's kind of neat about collecting Parker Brothers games, if you're collecting them complete in the box, is that they didn't have your standard flip-top boxes that almost all Atari games came in. They had these nice, big honking manuals with a little tray for the game and everything.
Yeah, and to Jeremiah's point, we're not saying Data Age is bad because they did have some good games. We just mentioned like Journey's Escape, and then also you're right, Frankenstein's Monsters, another good one.
It's a good game.
But unfortunately, they had some stinkers as well, which, like I said, I don't think anyone can defend Bugs or Warp Lock. There's just no way you can defend those two games.
Yeah. Okay, let's go telegames. So Brian talked about telegames earlier, and telegames, obviously the Sears brand. Later in Atari's life, they started releasing, again, third-party release games, but under their own license. And they had some really weird text labels. These are on a silver background. Right there. Really weird, to be honest, for a telegames cart, considering that they looked basically identical to Atari at the start. So these are really late release telegames carts. Epics. Everybody knows Epics for like 3 games: California games, winter games, and summer games.
Yeah.
But they were released on the 2600 by Epics. Videotech, or VidTech rather. These ones, I kind of like the look of the labels on these ones. They're pretty cool. The games themselves really aren't the best.
No.
But they're pretty cool labels. They're fun to collect for, and it's a comparatively small set. Amiga. So last episode, and if you go way back in the Retro Bliss podcast, well, that's Bugs with a Z channel of the ours. Bugs are great. Regular bugs, that's great. But Bugs, the Data Age game, I'm not a big fan of. Yes, that is Jeremiah Thomas says VidTech and US games belong together. They do? Okay. Well, then before I talk about that, let me talk about US games. 2 different cart styles. I don't know what they were thinking with this. Maybe it's easier to grab out.
I actually kind of like that because it is easier to.
Yeah, it is easier to grab out.
Design, I think.
Some US games really suck. Some US games are really good. It's kind of, you roll the dice. Egomania, I like a lot.
Yeah.
Picnic, not so much.
Yeah. Egomania is a very fun paddle game. I definitely recommend it because you can usually find it anywhere from like under $10 for sure. I mean, it's probably less, but definitely no more than $10.
And this is a pretty famous one. It's called Name This Game. And the reason it is called that is because they had a competition where people were to name this game. This is a game where you're a scuba diver shooting at an octopus that's trying to get your treasure or something along those lines. It's been a while since I played it. The game itself is pretty generic. It's not terrible, but it's not great. But but they had a competition, and U.S. Games shut down before the competition finished. So this was only ever released as Name This Game. Amiga. So back to what I was saying, BCB in our last episode, and me as one of our controller oddities. If you go way back to our first episode of Controller Oddities on the Retro Bliss Rewind podcast, Amiga made, this is a game that came with the board accessory called Mogul Maniac. And there was a couple more games that Amiga released for the 2600. But this is my not exactly mint copy of Mogul Maniac. But again, using that US Games kind of nudge there. Milton Bradley. So Milton Bradley made games for the 2600. Spitfire Attack is awesome because, again, if you look in that same episode of Controller Oddities, it had this this gun joystick that took like 3C batteries to light up one light inside the actual thing, and doesn't operate any differently from a joystick, but it looks awesome. And that came with Spitfire Attack. But Milton Bradley, like everybody was getting into it. Avalon Hill. Avalon Hill is known for board games. I'm a big fan of Axis and Allies, and some of the old Avalon Hill box games. But I really like these cartridges, even though they suck to stack. But they've got this cool 80s ribbed feeling to them. They're cool. And actually kind of similar in shape as the Konami games. Konami did not start with Nintendo. Konami started with Atari. Strategy X is great. Puyan. Maybe because I'm not good at it, but I've never been a fan. But some cool games there. Let's get this out of the way. This is a PG show.
Yeah, this
you
is
are not
disclaimer.
You are not good to see. So I brought two of mine out here to show. These came in nice big boxes. These are games, adult games published by Mystique. And when you open them up on the inside, anybody that was around in the 80s remembers going to video stores and there was that beaded curtain and behind was all the naughty stuff. And all the naughty stuff came in boxes like this. They're VHS and beta in very discreet cases like this. And your games come like this. So you can put this on your shelf and look all very sophisticated, and your kids will not know what you've actually got.
Mike is having some technical issues like he had earlier in the pre-show testing. This may go away, guys. Hold on a minute. So this is Providence because he's talking about games I don't like. This is exactly why this is the good Lord above coming down and striking him down because he's talking about games I don't like. No, I'm just kidding. This is part of history, and he
probably zoom us back out, Phil, while he's hopefully getting.
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry, I forgot that I was, but he was, and rightly so, wanting to at least bring it up so that you guys could at least hear and see and know about this, because there are some of you out there who know. Test your mic there, Mike. Are you back?
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
We hear you. It's just like you look like something from a Game Boy Advance video.
Now you've come back. Your picture looks better now. Okay.
Now it's coming back.
Because I could hear you guys. I could hear you guys the whole time. So it's so weird.
Yeah, your vocal.
Yes, I've been struck down. But anyhow, you could be all discreet and your kids would never know this up in your study. And then when your wife goes to bed, you can pull out a naughty game and play it.
So this,
That's all you're gonna
I'm going to
see.
put some. Poe is in the chat.
Is he? Yes.
I'm going to put that up. Okay.
Yep. Sleazy games get frozen.
I did that this one time on purpose. Okay.
I hope you're doing well, Mr. Poestyle.
I hope so too, man. We're hoping the best for you and your family, bro. We miss you. He's supposed to be on the
He
channel
was
tonight, but
he would have had some great commentary for me freezing during that segment. So these are pretty famous. I've never known how to pronounce this. I call it Zonoz, but it's Xonox. It's famous for their double carts, but a lot of people aren't aware. Much rarer are the single cart versions of the same games. They do exist, and they were on Coleco as well. And the reason I know they're on Coleco is because I accidentally bought a Coleco one thinking it was an Atari one, because they're basically identical, and they came in boxes like that. Okay. We've kind of dealt with most of one side of the table. Oh, here's an Apollo box.
one side
We already talked about Apollo.
Oh my goodness. Mike
Got a little bit
does
left on
everything.
this side.
Last week, Mr. Baseman was asking Mike where he stored all this stuff.
Z-Mag. Z-Mag has several releases for the Atari 2600, most of which aren't great. Tanks, but no tanks is pretty good. That one. And there were a whole pile, well, not a whole pile. There were a few games like this. K-Tel. This is Vulture Attack. Imagine if you took, and I'm going to do this so you can see, they had little handles. Manovision's Air Raid, which is considered one of the most rare Atari 2600 games, was in a blue cart with a handle like this. Vulture Attack is like if you took Demon Attack and made it not fun. This game sucks, if you've seen my mini review. But it's cool to have. It's like when you really need leverage to pull this out of your system because it's a bad game.
That one time you pull it out because you're not going to put it back in, right?
Is that what she said?
Stop it.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm going to get frozen again. I know it. 20th Century Fox. They made games a lot. This is the kind of cartridge style or label style that they're famous for. But some of their later games had these red labels. Obviously, despite the fact that some of them have the name on the end, some of them don't. But despite the fact, I like these labels a lot better than these ones. You got like MASH, you got Alien, great games. Jeremiah Thomas asks, are Vulture Attack and Condor Attack the same game? I believe they are. I do not have Condor Attack, but I believe they are. Just a couple of one-offs. You got Glib by Qualtronic Devices. And then you have ITT Family Games with Laser Base. Like, everybody and their mother was making games for the Atari at a certain point. And that was a large contributor to the video game crash, the North American video game crash in 1983.
Yeah, because there was literally no quality control. It's not like so you literally went from Atari having no quality control, to Nintendo that was like overkill quality control. It wasn't until really the 90s until we finally had a kind of a happy medium there, with games.
Jeremiah Thomas says that the 4 red label games were the first 4. I thought they were the last 4, but you could be right. I'm just kind of going from my memory and preconceptions. So you're probably right with that. Jeremiah Thomas is usually right when he corrects me on things.
I thought I was wrong once, but I was mistaken. But anyway.
M Network. When I was a kid, I thought the shape of these cartridges were the coolest. We had a bunch of them. We had Frogs and Flies. We had Adventures of Tron. We had Armor Ambush. This shape drives me absolutely, like, how the you can't stack them because you form in a circle
slightly
eventually.
longer, like the Magic also.
Yeah, and so you got to like flip them back and forth, but then it's look bad on a shelf. Don't do this for cartridge games. But the early ones were these blue labels, and then they became the white labels. M Network became something else, and I'm blanking on what they became. They started as M Network, and they became something else.
Well, I think INTV bought them in the mid from Mattel. Well, I think that's maybe.
So the thing with the vast majority of these, not all of them, but the vast majority, is that they're ports of Intellivision games.
INTV Corp. INTV Corp.
Yeah, INTV.
Yeah, I was just saying, I thought they bought them, and then yeah.
SpectraVision or Spectra Video. It depends on which cartridges you have. I happened to accidentally grab 2 Spectra Video, but they do SpectraVision, as it's also known as. They have pretty cool looking carts. I like these ones. It does have the little grab pull. The back has this neat little texture on it. And they have like really silver labels. They're really reflective to the point that once that ink starts wearing off at all, it's really hard to read. The black ink anyway. So, but yeah, SpectraVision. What do we got here? We got Mythicon. Games like Firefly and Sorcerer by Mythicon. Not really much to say about these. And yes, that's a very good point, Wallace. You'll notice that basically, if you cut this off, this is an Intellivision cartridge.
Mm-hmm.
And you can actually see the little tabs. And it's like an Intellivision cartridge with an adapter to plug into your Atari 2600, which is why they're made like that, but it's still stupid. I hate these. Froggo had a bunch of really bad games, to be honest. Some basically, you can't even say ports, just stolen games or licensed to be something. But like Amadar is Robo something, Robot Web or something, or Robo Spider. But Froggo games, like if you're looking for good games in the Atari 2600, this is not where I'd start. Exus only had 2 games, Video Reflex and Video Jogger. Neither are good. Don't bother.
Those labels are doing like the Activision.
Yeah. We've already talked about the M Network stuff. ColecoVision made games for the Atari 2600. Some of these are good. Some of these are not so great. I would say on average, though, it's a pretty solid library. I'm not a fan of Donkey Kong on the 2600. Donkey Kong Jr. is better, but well, since Mr. Poestyle brought it up, Tiger Vision, mostly known for their handheld, little crappy LCD handhelds, also made Atari 2600 carts. One thing I do like about them is they're all very colorful. They've got the grab handles, and it has the indent on both sides. This one in the middle here is actually a pretty rare game. most Tiger Vision games you're going to spend a bit more for because they are rare. They were not overly popular. CBS Electronics made some games.
Solar Fox.
I love Solar Fox. It's such a simple game, but it's so good. You had Sega. So both Sega and Nintendo through ColecoVision most of the time, sometimes Parker Brothers, but they were publishing Atari 2600 games. So you've got Sega labels like this, or the much more common ones, you got Sega games like this. So, okay, I got two more. I'm finishing with a real oddball for Americans, but this is Absolute. Probably more popular for their production on the 7800 than the 2600, but there were some 2600 games. These guys were a very late publisher for the 2600. Yeah, so Mega Race and Wizard of War are also CBS Electronics, also Gorf. So there are some solid CBS Electronics games on the 2600.
Yeah, I highly recommend all four of those ones that have been mentioned. They're all good on the 2600.
Yeah, and last but not least, because we're probably going to go long. I've taken up way too much time. I apologize. Zeller's used to be a chain up here, similar to a Kmart or a Walmart, like 80s, 90s Walmart. And they had their own versions of a lot of games, and they were super cheap. So generic image on the front of the cartridge, really cheesy, just big text at the end label. And these are all different names for different Atari games. Earth Attack, if I'm not mistaken, is Defender. Just a nice little oddity. It's a set, I think a complete set of Zeller's carts is 12 games. It's really neat. I'm missing, I think, one of them. But these are decently common to find up here, but considered very rare elsewhere because Zeller's, if I'm not mistaken, was a Canadian company. I believe they were owned by a Hudson's Bay company. And yeah, that is the third-party stuff I had to show. That is not every third-party publisher. There are a whole pile of one-offs, but that is a large majority of them. If I'm not mistaken, there were 35 third-party publishers during the Atari 2600 original lifespan.
Yep. Yeah, that's about right. And like I said, some of them good, others bad, because and again, we're not going to get into details on this, but ultimately, as we kind of said, it's just the high number of third-party developers that entered because they wanted to follow Activision's lead and tried to take a piece of that pie, just led to such a high saturation of poorly made games. And because they just didn't have the same expertise that like the developers that Activision had. I mean, it was just anyone possible. Hey, can you try to make us a game? We don't really care how it looks or if it makes sense. We just want to get a game out there, And
one thing to note, as famous as these ones are, they are all terrible games.
Right.
Like B&E, which is what I'm going to call it for this podcast because I'm respectful. But B&E is basically Kaboom, but somehow they made Kaboom suck. Like, I don't know how.
But yeah, exactly. I mean, so there was just a lot of poor games coming out there around late 1982, 1983, and not just third party, but even Atari themselves. I mean, they were rushing some games out that led to some very high profile games ending up being very bad. In the scheme of things because of rushing it for the Christmas season. And then also, during this time, you got to think about how many consoles and there were so many things out at that point because everyone just wanted a piece of the market that it just kind of imploded on itself at that point because Rule of thumb, I think, we can say as we've gone through console generations, it's like 3 is a magic number because you don't want just one console because you want competition. Because competition makes things better. But like 3 always seemed to be the magic number. Like when you started to get more than 3, like big players for consoles and stuff, things just got ugly. And like that's what happened at this point. Because by 1983, I mean, you had 2600, you had 5200, you had ColecoVision, you had Intellivision, you had Vectrex, you had then the computer lines coming through. So you had the Odyssey 2, and that were being
and
marketed.
Being the early days, computers were genuine competitors.
Correct.
As just sole consoles, which didn't happen again until kind of now. Like I remember in the 90s and in the early 2000s, computer gaming was huge. Don't get me wrong. It was still a competitor for your video game time, but it was always, do I have enough RAM? Do I have a good enough computer? And now it's kind of gotten to a point with Steam that it is becoming as easy, especially with all the updates you have to do on consoles nowadays. It came to a point where
today the line's blurred. I mean, your game console's ultimately a computer. I mean, for all intents and purposes. I mean, today, but there was enough of variation through the 90s, early 2000s and stuff that folks didn't really, they didn't see the two being quote unquote competition. But like at this period of time, it was very much competition, which is why you had kind of what I call the crazy controllers of the second generation, because they were afraid of PC gaming at that point, or not PC gaming, but microcomputer gaming at that point. But again, all that saturation of stuff between all the bad games and all that. And again, the one game I'm talking about wasn't even Pac-Man. I mean, it was another game where the person was only given weeks to do it. We all know it was E.T. I mean, again, that was one where
you don't have to say the person. Howard readily accepts that title.
I mean, that at the end of the day, it was just,
it led proud of it actually.
I mean, it led to the crash. But again, and again, the thing to keep in mind though is that the crash wasn't like everything just disappeared. It was just a recession, in the North American market. I mean, you could buy so much stuff for so cheap, and part of that was because retailers couldn't return it back to the actual publishers because the publishers were already out of business. So it was like fire sailing stuff at that point. And but again, we lived and learned from it, and obviously things got better.
And that whole situation led to what happened with Nintendo and how strict that they were.
And again, that's all personal preference there on ET. I mean, I know a couple people who like the ET game, because you're right. If you read the manual and you really knew what you're supposed to do, I mean, some people enjoyed it, but I would say, it's obvious when you got to throw how much of it in the desert that general consensus was it was not a good game. So
we have taken all of Phil's time. Why don't we let him talk about homebrew?
Yes.
I want to say Operation Shutdown just made a great point. I remember this too, man. Back in the day, there were so many games, and there were so many at one point that you could go to the store and there'd be discount bins of games for $1 a piece. It was just crazy,
That's when my dad picked up a lot of them.
Yeah.
Because by the mid 80s, we had, or mid to late 80s, we had probably 40 or 50 games for our 2600. Yeah. And I remember thinking I was totally baller. And now I've got probably 4 times that sitting around me.
Okay. Well, I am talking about homebrews. And so we've gone an hour. So I'm going to try to make this fast and nasty. But I am going to
hopefully
make
not
it
too nasty,
thorough enough.
Well, plus we're going to talk about some of our quote unquote hidden gems.
And we are going to talk about our favorites and some hidden gems as well. But as many of you may know, I love homebrews. Mike does as well. And I I was first turned.
Brian hates homebrews, though.
I was gonna say I like homebrews too, but that's okay. I just don't have a channel that showcases.
There are most definitely adult homebrews, Jeremiah Thomas, but we won't talk about those.
Okay. Well, I was first turned on to homebrews basically by Michael Thomason. I was at Korg's a few years back. That's where I met Brian, and I bought my first physical homebrew from him there. I'm on a green screen, so it looks kind of funky, but it's called Kung Fu Combat. And for those of you who may not be able to tell, that's Michael on the front. He actually signed this copy. But anyway, this guy
doesn't look that cool in real life, just FYI.
Well, he's been on the show. You can judge for yourself. But anyway, that got me started in collecting homebrews, and we're talking about physical games. There are thousands of homebrews that I have access to, but not physical, the physical carts. So, and physical carts, if you're buying them now, you know, if you're buying a complete and box version, you're going to spend between 60 and $70 for a complete and boxed game. So I loved video game ports, and I kind of started my collection with Champ Game games. I just did.
Started with the best.
Yeah. And I'm not going to show you my whole collection, but I'll just give you some of the examples, starting with my absolute favorite Elevator Agent right there. That's from Champ Games. And then Gorf Arcade, again, a green screen, and then Turbo Arcade. But these games are amazing. These games are not the games that we had and that we've mentioned. These games are on a whole totally different level than what Mike has mentioned. These games, I don't know how would you describe
They're
them,
the
Mike?
type of games that if they came out in like 1983, or let's put it pre-crash. Let's say it came out in 1982. They would be the type of games that absolutely everybody would have to have because they would blow people away.
Yeah, I think
in fairness, they're using memory that was not really available back then. But
and that's what I was going to say. I mean, the key is that they show the actual potential of the console, but the reality is the memory size on those carts would have been so expensive back then. There's just no way they could do it. So, I mean, that's why a lot of those games, were the way they were, and why the homebrew is so much more better than what we were used to then.
And which is really what kind of turned me on to wanting to start collecting. So I started collecting.
Bill is getting so turned on this episode.
So anyway, I got turned on to Ricardo Pym. Speaking of getting turned on, I got turned on by Ricardo Pym. Yeah. And I bought a number of his games, and I didn't bring all of his up, but Space Pac-Man, like I said, I'm on a green screen.
The best one.
Yep. This is a great game. And then this one's really not going to show well. I didn't even think about this when I picked this out of the Bliss Cave.
Oh.
I'm on a green screen, but Hero 2, this is not a hack of Hero. People think it might be, but it's got totally all new levels, all new sprites. It's really a good game. Also, just recently, I started a collection of Audacity games. From this one was written by David Crane and Gary Kitchen. And what's really cool about these games?
What's really cool about that game is its cloaking device.
Yeah,
all these games have some pretty good cloaking.
I don't know. If I got out of here, wait a minute. I may be able to hold on a minute.
We're gonna see his real background for the first time ever on the show.
Oh no!
I can turn off my green screen. Hold on a minute.
Nope. that just made it worse. Oh, there
you go.
Okay. I have a signed copy. This is the collector's edition. I bought this edition because
fancy pants.
I had the ROM with it. When you turn this on, you have, if you put the joystick.
You keep saying turn on.
When you turn the game on.
Go ahead.
Are you okay, Mike?
I'm okay.
Are you okay, Mike?
He's a card shy of a full deck, if you ask me. But anyway, if
at least a card.
If it gives you the option to register the game, and if you decide to register a game, a QR code comes on, and when you register the game, it gives you a download link where you can download the ROM, and you can register your scores when you play the game, whether you play them on your console or whether you play them digitally, which I haven't really had a chance to do much yet, but the option is there. And then I have Alien Abduction, which I just recently got from Audacity Games, which has the same option. Okay, so now I'm taking my green screen off. Give me just a minute. Okay, there we go. All right. But like I say, you talk, and those were $100 a pop. Those were $100 a pop. So I'm telling you, it is not cheap to collect homebrew games. Now, I'm going to show you some games, and I'm going to give you options of where you can get some of these things. But these games I got from Atari Age. Now, these aren't those were original games. Those last four I showed you were original games, and the first game I showed you, Kung Fu Combat, was an original game. And this is an original game for the 2600 called Blinky Goes Up. This is kind of a cool game where you just climb up to the top and you collect I think it's a pill or food or whatever, and you make it to the top, and then you move on to the next level. And
thank God it's not called Blinky Goes Down. I'd have a stroke.
Yeah. And then all of you know about Lode Runner. This is a really good version of Lode Runner. A lot of people didn't think this was possible. I think there are 99 or 100 levels, something like that. It has a save key feature, but it also has a password saver if you don't have a save key, where you can save your progress that way. Very nicely done. I wanted to show this game. Reason I wanted to show this game. This is one of my favorite. This is Ruby Q. It's a port of Qbert for the 2600. This is no longer for sale yet, but it's going to be for sale now. I'm going to tell you how. And then I've only got a few more. Space Rocks, which is a port of Asteroids, which is in the Atari Age store. Excellent port of Asteroids. This is a homebrew by John, the immortal John Hancock, called Game Panic 3. This is was written by Jason Santucci, who is a friend of the channel as well. And I actually bought this directly from John at a show. So this isn't I didn't buy this from a store. I actually bought this at a show. So a game like this, you would actually have to buy from a show probably, because I don't think I've looked around. I don't know that it's for sale anywhere. But speaking of Jim and Tronic, this is what's funny. I bought it, but I knew I already had it and I don't know why I didn't. I didn't bring the cart. I didn't think to look inside the box. I have a dual cart, that has Game Panic 3 and BLT Blast on it. And the original Game Panic 3 had nothing. It just, you know, it just didn't have this label on the front like this version I bought from John Hancock.
So now you're a variation collector.
I am a variation collector. And then this is probably Jason Santucci's claim to fame, and his probably the best game that he's made is Dragon Chalice, which you can't read the name of it because of the green screen, but this is an adventure style game. I haven't got around to beating it yet, but I'm looking forward to doing that. So I want to show you those, and I want to show you ways that you can get these games so you can play these on your console today. And I want to show you a way where you can, if you have a game, you want to play a game on your console. If you want to play on your console, you can. There's something called a Harmony Cart. Now let me do something here. I'm in the Atari Age store right now, and the links for all these websites that we're getting ready to go to are in the description of the video, and I believe Mike put them in the.
I did as well. Yep.
Yep, in his if you're over at the simulcast over on his channel, they're over there. Okay. Before we get to the game section, I'm going to go over to the hardware section here. And no, you can't do that here. You can't do this here. Let me go back. I lied. For some reason, I'm thinking the Harmony Cart's over here. There's something called a Harmony Cart. And if you can buy a Harmony Cart, and you can put ROMs on a Harmony Cart and actually play on your console. But I'm going to show you something that's even cooler if you actually want to do something that if you want a labeled version of a game. And I didn't know that this was possible until Mike gave me a link to this today. So this is the Atari 8 store for the 2600, and you have your homebrew section, your trackball series, hacks, reproductions. I mostly go over here to the homebrew section, and then it's just in alphabetical order. And we'll go over here to Aardvark, which is one of my favorite games. And
good game.
You can buy the cart, but if you want to add the box, it's $15 for the box. The game is $35, but the box is $15. But if you're a collector, that's what you do.
That's what I always do.
Yeah. So. But that's what you do. Now, if you have a trackball for your 2600, they have trackball versions of the games, of some games. They have 3 of them here. They have Missile Command, Millipede, and Centipede. You can buy them here. You can do some checking out. Okay, another way you can buy games is by Good Deal Games. Now, this is our buddy Michael Thomason. He was on our podcast a few weeks ago, more than a few weeks ago. How long has it been? About 6 weeks ago, something like that.
A while ago.
Yeah. Anyway, he has a number of homebrews for a lot of different systems. But when you come to his site, you'll come over here to the 2600 section, and then you just scroll through and just pick out what you want. Now, there are some that will be sold out and some that won't be. You can just go through, and just kind of a good way to scroll through and compare, because they may have the same game that Atari Age does. It may be more, it may be less. I don't know. Just kind of window shop and see. Okay, another way is called
Video 61.
Yeah, Video 61, and I'm trying to figure out how I get to the 2600 versions of the games on this site. Because
Video 61 is not the the most user-friendly website. They haven't updated that in a long time.
Yeah, because when Mike told me about this, I put it up here.
But I do believe that they are the oldest online retailer for this type of stuff.
Okay. But there's an email address there. If you have any questions, you can go to them. But I'm not really seeing a link for the 2600 stuff, but I may be missing something. I see 5200 stuff. I see
it's there, but it's not worth searching for.
Okay. If you got time, just check it out.
Yeah.
Okay. And then a place called Hoser Video Games. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier. I didn't know that this was even a thing. As many of you may know, I do homebrew highlights on the channel from time to time, and I also stream homebrews on the channel, on all that stuff I provide links where you can download the ROMs for these games. Well, if you come to this site and you provide this guy with those ROMs that I provide you, if you send those ROMs to him, if more than likely if he doesn't have a label, he can get one, and he can create a cart for you. And I was looking at the prices, and it's not that bad. It's really very reasonable, I think.
He is the thing to know about Hoser Games. It's the low end of stuff. He also has a reputation of he'll put anything on a cart, regardless of legality. So that is up to you. Please be responsible. Please don't steal people's stuff that have asked for it not to be. But if you want a cartridge copy of a ROM that is freely distributed, Hoser Games can take care of you.
And know that if I give you a link for something, it's legally obtainable. If I provide a link, you're free. You're free and clear to do so. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about it if you get your ROMs from Retro Bliss Gaming. Okay. So, but the order info, where is it at? I was finding the prices somewhere. I forget what it was. Okay.
Yeah. Cheap.
A 4K cart is $8 a cart. $8.
Yep.
An 8K card is 12, a 16K card is 12, and a 32K card is 16. Now it says you have to pay shipping.
Well, we read all that though. That price is when you're buying 20 or more of the same cart, I believe.
So you want to buy not of the same cart, but if you're buying 20 or more games, those are your prices.
But still, I mean, think about if you're serious about wanting to play a game that you don't have, and you're serious. I mean, if you don't want to go the Harmony route, then you must be serious about having a physical game with a separate label for each individual
you
game.
won't get a box, you won't get a manual, but you'll get a cartridge.
If it were me and I were doing it, I would order probably at least 20 to 50.
Yeah, but we're sick in the head.
Yeah.
And you slept on the couch far too much. Click off the Hoser website.
Yeah. Okay. and then last but not least is consolemoo.com. And this is mostly ColecoVision stuff, but there are some 2600 games on here as well. Some of which I actually mentioned, the Dragon Chalice.
Dragon Chalice, yeah.
Let's see. The
it's a
think
Kiplix. It's called Kiplix. 2384 is one of them.
Yeah, but there's a few on here. So just go to those links and check them out. The links are in the description of the video. So
one thing before we move on, we're going to quickly talk about our favorites and then be done, I think.
Yes.
But I forgot to bring this up. Arcadia / Starpath. These are these are your Communist Mutants from Space.
I just love that title.
It's a great, and I specifically picked this one from my collection to show because it is the best title. But these are cassette games, and this is the most common of them because this came with not only game, but I'm not going to open it up, but I'll show you. But it's a cartridge that plugs in to your 2600 and then into a cassette player, and it basically loads the ROM. And these games have better graphics, better music. There's a version of Frogger that is way better.
The official Frogger is awesome.
Yeah. So that's another publisher, and these, I think there was 11 of them. 12? No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how. I'm missing 2 of them. I know that, but there was a set amount. It was under 15.
Did you see what Poe said?
Oh, what did Poe say?
He said this is like a weekly episode of the show.
Oh, it's not that bad, is it?
All right, let's get to
Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. The show, if you want to see a bunch of old farts just talk about video games and have fun, it's so good to sit around and listen to that.
All right. Well, all right, guys, who wants to go first? What we're going to do is we're going to mention our favorite officially released games. We're going to talk about our favorite homebrews briefly on both. And then if we have a few hidden gems, we'll bring those up too. So who wants to go first?
So I'll just kind of list off some of my favorites based on the rankings that I've done for my mini reviews. I've done about 150 of them so far, but 10 out of 10s for me: Warlords, Frostbite, Enduro, Solar Fox. Solar Fox is a very simple game, but I love it. Pango, 9s out of 10 for me. Tanks but no tanks, Pitfall 2, Demon Attack, Pressure Cooker, Frogger, Tapper, Dolphin, Sequest, Yar's Revenge, Mousetrap, Kaboom, Tron Deadly Discs, Joust. A personal favorite is Space Invaders. There's so many others that, depending on my mood, could even trump some of these. Lots of really, really great games on the 2600.
How about homebrews?
Homebrews, Juno First, which I did a review of last week. I love Juno First. Elevator Agent is my favorite Champ Games game. Probably followed by Wizard of War. I really like Wizard of War. Fall Down, fantastic multiplayer. Putting me on the spot, man. Space Pac-Man is I just love how ridiculous it is. Lots of great homebrews out there. But if I may mention, I think Jeremiah is high to say that Video Olympics is better than Warlords. But Warlords is my favorite paddle game of all time. Like I said, Jeremiah is usually right. That's like the only thing I think he's wrong on.
All right. What about you, Brian?
I mean, when it comes to favorites, again, a lot of those well-known Atari games were all good for their time. And I guess when I look at a lot of this stuff, it's, I don't like compare it to today per se. I compare it to like what's the cost of the game and how much fun is it, and go from there. And like I said, a lot of those core Atari titles you can't go wrong on. A lot of the core, and again, this is very general, but again, I find myself going to a lot of those core Atari games, especially paddle games, because I've said in numerous episodes, I love playing paddle games on my Atari. In Activision, most of those games are all fun to go back to and replay. I mean, there's a couple stinkers in it, but for the most part, generally it's a good experience. And Magic games, I always go back to those a lot as well. So when it comes to, I guess, the commercial games, that's kind of where I'm at, like those well-known Atari games. And like to Mike's point, Space Invaders, I freaking love Space Invaders on the 2600. Yeah. I mean,
that was my first love.
Right.
That was the killer app.
Oh yeah,
the first killer app.
Yep. And And when it comes to homebrew, I played some homebrew on the 2600. I mean, but I'll be honest, more of my homebrew's been on the 7800. But I do know Champ Games is obviously a big content. I mean, he makes great stuff. And one of these days I'll be buying his stuff. It's just, I keep struggling. Like, do I want to invest in the physical copies or do I just want to buy the digital copies? Because again, like we've talked in previous shows, not that I don't like physical, but man, digital is very convenient on a flash cart to play.
The only problem with the new Champ
I know
the
two new games won't work with the flash carts right now.
You got to buy physical now.
So
yeah. Well, I struggled when I had to think about what I was.
We all know it's Pac-Man. You can say it's Pac-Man.
Yeah. Okay. Well, part of what I think about when I think about what my favorites were, it ties a little bit into the nostalgia. Because when I had my games, all the games I had coming up, I bought myself, and I played a lot of those games for hours, and some of them were simplistic, but I still had a lot of fun with them, and I guess because of that alone, and the thing about the 2600 is the graphics may not be great, but man, the gameplay. It doesn't take away from some of the gameplay action of the games. That's one thing I like about the 2600. But anyway, I'm just going to list the ones that I wrote down. Berserk.
I love Berserk.
Yeah. Don't laugh. Okay. Fishing Derby. I had fun with that. I had a lot of fun with
it. One player, I don't like it. 2-player, it's good.
My brother and I played that a lot. Enduro, Mike mentioned that. I like Dig Dug, Centipede, Joust. Mike mentioned that. Keystone Capers. One game I played a lot of was Mega Mania.
I love Mega Mania.
Yeah,
I'm more of a Spider Fighter guy. There's always that competition between Mega Mania and Spider Fighter. They're both great games.
Yeah, Missile Command. I just that sound that as soon as you hit the reset button, that sound it makes just brings back memories, man.
And Phil hears that all the time because of his rage resets.
I know. This is another game you guys would think I'm crazy, but Skydiver. I love Skydiver. I remember Skydiver. I played
its charm for sure.
I played that a bunch. And you guys mentioned Space Invaders. Chopper Command.
You're a legend at Chopper Command.
I can play that a little bit.
As we're talking about Activision, like I said, Stampede. I played a lot of Stampede.
Yes, I had Stampede. I like Stampede. It could get frustrating, but it's not a long game. I could never play for one game for a long time. I could play for a long time, but I would hit reset a lot. Another game I liked a lot was Venture, and then Demon Attack and Asteroids.
Yeah.
So those were the original releases that I had.
If you like Venture, play the homebrew Wolfenstein 3D. It's so funny. It's basically Venture, but World War II Germany.
Okay. All right. Well, the homebrews that I listed, and there are so many. I'm like, it's like Mike and I were talking about before the podcast. Some of these choices, like trying to pick your favorite child. How do you do this? But Elevator Agent is my favorite all-time homebrew game, port or non-port, bar none. I'm with Mike on that. Robot War 2684, Draconian.
I would love that game so much more if I didn't suck at Robotron.
Draconian is amazing. I don't know, Mike, if you've played that one yet or not. But oh, dude,
I have. We actually talked about that, and that's going to be next week's review.
All right, we get a chance to see that. Gorf Arcade, man, that's a really good port for the 2600. That's another Champ Games game. Space Rocks, which is an asteroids. I showed you that. Scramble. I like that because I'm halfway good at it. Aardvark. I like Aardvark a lot. Pac-Man 8K. The 8K version is my favorite of all the ports for the Pac-Man. Juno First, Mappy, Ruby Q, Load Runner, and Kicks. So those.
Oh yeah, Kicks is great.
Yeah. So
it's like every time you guys mention a game, it's like, oh yeah, that should have been on my list.
Yeah. I did have 3 hidden gems that I wrote down. If I'd have spent more time, I could have picked some more out. But there's a hidden gem called Boing. Yeah, it's like a Cuber style game.
You're on a grid.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's not a common game. It's kind of rare actually, but it's fun. Another one Mike showed tonight. It's called Fast Eddie. I like it. It's pretty fun. It's a kind of like a Donkey Kong style game. It's big up and down ladder. You have to collect things, and then once you collect the things, make it to the top, and then make a final jump, and then No Escape by Imagic. So those are hidden gems for me. So yeah. So
yeah, for I guess I'll go next. For mine, like I said, for time's sake, 'cause I know we're way over tonight. That's some of the ones, because like I said, I think when I pick some of these, it's based on what's the actual price of admission, and is it really something that someone would maybe know about or not, and and is it fun for the price of admission. The first one, which again, I think a lot of people don't realize this one came out because it was toward the end of the Atari's commercial lifespan, but Roadrunner, I think they did a pretty good job for the 2600 version. Obviously, if you have the NES version, I would say, that's probably a better version, but for the 2600, I was very impressed with what they did. And it again, it's a lot of fun to play. This is probably one that's a little more on the expensive end. Loose, I'm guessing, I think loose is probably around $20-$30. And I know complete in box is about, I think, 50 new, or if it's new, 40 if it's not. Another one, which is in the red labels, because again, we know, how much Phil loves Pac-Man 2600. But they did kind of finally redeem themselves in the late 80s with Junior Pac-Man.
It's a good version.
And with the Junior Pac-Man, they kind of got rid of the old rules, so they were able to do the black background, because there used to be the rule, unless it was a space game, it couldn't be a black background.
That was never an official rule, but it was more. It was a guideline for sure.
Yeah. But this one had rolling maze with it, and definitely a fun one that's worth picking up. Another one, I know someone mentioned they didn't like it, but again, I think for the price of admission, I like it, and it's kind of funny too. Is Sprint Master. Now, with that said, I don't like to play this as one player. If I have someone to play with, I enjoy it a lot more, but this is part of the Sprint series, so you have, from the arcade and so forth, and like on the NES. But again, it's not terrible for the price of admission. I mean, I think I got this loose for $6. And, what's kind of funny is, they kind of cheaped out, because if you look closely at the box art, or the art, you'll notice it's the same artwork that they used for Pole Position. But and again, they did this with another game as well, which is Solaris. I mean, this one for sure is so worth getting.
Man, the gameplay and graphics on that.
Yeah, so good. And it's kind of a spin-off of Star Raiders, which is also funny because they used the Star Raiders box art again, for this game. So that was another one. And I guess probably just 2 more. Because we mentioned a couple of them already earlier in the show I was going to have. But another one I kind of find fun, I would like to have had it with paddle controls, but for not having paddle, it still plays well. And this one you can actually get new for like $15, and even less for card only, but it's off the wall. Again, it was kind of a spin-off of the Breakout formula, except you had a dragon at the top, even though the dragon looks more like a caterpillar. But you know, the point was you got to hit the dragon so many times to move on to the next level, while also you know, breaking the wall, which was just pretty much blocks. And then there was different power-ups you can get in the process. And again, for its time and the price point, I think this is another cool one to check out. The last one, for time's sake, because we already mentioned like Egomania being great, Journey Escape being great, Planet Patrol we talked about, another great one. Mine actually says Spectra Vision on it, so mine was apparently a re-release copy. But then with that, this one I just find funny. Is Alien, and we kind of talked about it.
Oh, that one was on my list. Yeah,
and the thing
bad.
is, I mean, this is how I guess Pac-Man 2600 should have been? Question mark.
So the way I always say it when you're talking about hidden gems, because I totally agree, this was on my hidden gems list. Better, Ladybug and Mousetrap are better, but they're not hidden.
Right.
This is a fantastic Pac-Man style game. I love that you have that little flamethrower to tell guys to screw off.
Right.
Yeah, great game.
Yeah, great games. And it's just, and this one's a little more pricey. I think now it's about $20 loose. But again, it's a fun one to play, and not what you would expect an Alien game to be.
I never understood the Frogger in between levels. You know, going from one end of the screen to the other. You know what I mean? Or not Frogger, but Freeway or whatever. You know, trying to get from one end of the, you know, after you complete a level.
You gotta escape, man.
But yeah, and to Jeremiah's point, you're correct. Atari Core never did. Atari Core wouldn't mess with any of the extra peripherals. It was just core joystick, and that was
whatever everybody had.
Right. So
I'm just gonna fly through 4 really quick hidden gems. I've already said it is one of my favorites. Again, simple game, but such a good game. I love Solar Fox. Quest for Quintana Roo, great game. It takes some getting used to, but great game. Very, very good game. Thunderground. Imagine Dig Dug, but you're a tank, and you've got to take out like nuclear reactors while avoiding other tanks. I love this game from Sega. And Tanks But No Tanks. Who would have thought Z-Mag has an absolute winner here? I think this was called Phantom Tanks on other from other publishers, maybe in the in Europe. But this is a fantastic game. I like Tanks But No Tanks a lot.
Okay. Well, is that it?
I mean, no, but we better wrap it up.
I was going to say, we could talk for Atari for probably another couple hours.
I knew that this was going to go over. I didn't expect it to be 38
I got more sitting around here. We could talk Gorp. We could talk Wizard of War. We could talk Star Wars. What do you want?
That's all right. You know, that's okay that we went over, because this is probably one of my favorite episodes that we've had as far as nostalgia is concerned, because like I said, the 2600 is just near and dear to the heart.
Poe's last comment is not dirty. Can we put it up for everybody to see?
Okay,
it's
I
hilarious.
took away the comments. Let's see, what's this? I shouldn't have put it up there.
You can wrap up the show now.
I hope you wet the bed tonight, Mike.
I won't.
Wow, this is really going off course now. This is probably time to close it up.
It is. Hey, guys, listen, I appreciate everybody.
Hey, Mike's internet just went out again, so, you know.
See? Exactly.
I mean, the fact that it stopped, his face right now, just where the internet stopped. That's hilarious.
It was meant to be because. So, okay. Listen, everybody, I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much for stopping in and watching Retro Bliss Gaming. And those of you who are watching the simulcast over at Mike's Gaming Gala, we appreciate you guys being here. Be sure to tune in next week to Retro Bliss Rewind. So with that, you guys have an awesome day. We'll see you next time. We're out. Bye.
See ya.